So now that I have my mix of coffee ready from the last part, in this part, I will use this mix to start painting. I have created a drawing of two cups with steam coming out of them into a shape of a heart. And I thought this was a really cute and nice theme for a Valentine's Day painting. If anybody would like to paint along with me to this video, I would leave the stencil on my channel and you could use it for your own painting. I have transferred my drawing onto a watercolor sheet of paper. You could also pause the video and draw this yourself on a watercolor sheet of paper before you proceed to this part where we paint. For the painting itself, I start by creating these very light shadows beneath the coffee cups, using the lightest intensity of coffee. I clean my paintbrush and I use the cleaned paintbrush to blend in the edges. I want really soft shadows, so I am using the blending technique. The way you do this is that you clean your paintbrush and then you use the completely clean paintbrush with all its water removed on the tissue paper to smoothen the edges of your shadow. As a next step, I get more concentrated mix of coffee and I drop more intense shadows beneath the coffee cups, like you can see here. I have gone around the sugar cubes and the spoon. I have been careful to do so. And now let us proceed while the lower part of this painting dries to block in some color on the upper portion of this artwork. It is always good to start with the lightest shade of your color, because it's always possible to layer on top once your paint has dried or once your coffee has dried and put more color on top of it, but it's not so easy to remove color once you have put it there. So we always go from the lightest to the darkest colors. Once again, I have blended my colors around the heart shape. I have blended the light shade of paint that I put there with clean and damp brush. You'll often hear terminologies like that when you see any watercolor painting video or when you see, even other mediums getting used, because there are some universal techniques that apply to any artwork that you might create. Those techniques involve blending, wet on wet. Wet on wet just means that I wet the paper first like I'm doing right now and then I drop color on top of it. Blending means that you clean your paintbrush in water, then you dab it on a tissue papers to remove all the excess water from the paintbrush. So you have a damp, very dry brush with just a very little amount of water after you have dabbed it on the tissue paper. And once you have done that, you use that paintbrush to blend the edges. That is, you smoothen the edges with that very damp brush. Right now I am working wet on wet with coffee, so I am wetting my background first. I am careful to go around the coffee cups because I do not want color bleeding into it. I want hard edges at the borders of the coffee cup. So I very carefully go around it. And once I have enough water here, I will start to add some colors. First, let's intensify the center even more, the center of the heart even more, around which my steam would spiral in the shape of a heart. And then let us go around this heart, just like so. You want a good contrast between the white areas and the darker areas so that the painting really stands out. That is the principle of art that we call contrast. It helps your painting pop and look dimensional as opposed to flat on a piece of paper. I spread the colors more around the background, which is still very wet. Mind you, this is wet enough that the color spreads and looks smooth. The backgrounds look smooth, but not so wet that it just spills all over the place. So it moves in a very controlled fashion because the water ratio is right on the piece of paper that I'm using. So it's just enough water to allow a little bit of movement of the colors, but not too much movement of the colors. This is our first layer of colors, and once the first layer is blocked in, we move to create more and more layers. I'll show this in all the subsequent parts how we complete this painting, and I will be along to guide you on every part. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below, and I will be sure to address each and every concern or question that you have regarding how to create these artworks. While I still have time, that is, while the paper is still wet, I continue to layer colors on top. That is, I put more of that color, darker color, on top of the lighter color that I had earlier. While painting wet on wet like we are doing right now, there's one important thing to keep in mind, which is that if you notice your water on the paper that you had earlier put on the background has started to dry, then you should stop painting. Otherwise, there is this undesirable effect called blooming that you create, and that tends to take the attention away from the painting, the smooth and nice painting you're creating, into this very rough looking mistake. So that is not something we want, and that happens when the water has started to dry. So if you notice it's starting to dry, if the temperature there is too high, it's better to stop working on the top portion, and we can layer more again once your paper is completely dry. So once again, if you notice that your background is starting to dry, do not add more and more watery mixes on top of it. That will ruin the painting. With that, I will conclude this part and we will continue in the next one.